Welcome to Crossroads. On Crossroads, we're looking specifically at the evolving relationship between Armenia and the European Union. We called it Crossroads because Armenia is at a turning point in its modern history. How will it balance between the powerful forces that are interacting in the Caucasus? Which friends, allies, civilizational values will it choose? It cannot be denied that there are very difficult choices to be made in the face of considerable uncertainty in the world. Our discussions have started in Armenia. Later on, we'll move to the center of the EU to talk to decision makers there. Here in Armenia, I'm speaking to some of those involved in the public debate on this relationship. To help us understand the ins and outs of the matter, we turn today to someone who has a global perspective on the situation and who is also a very incisive commentator on Armenian politics. Eric Hacopian, welcome to Crossroads.
Thank you for having me.
Eric, many of us know you best as the host of Civilinet's program Insights. The program lives up to its promise as it does indeed provide very insightful commentary on Armenian national and international politics. You have roots in Iran, if I'm correctly informed. But you lived much of your life in California, where you were a political consultant. You worked on grassroots mobilization, policy advocacy, campaign strategy. You advised political candidates, and you helped set up political initiatives generally. Eric, as I said, you're an observer of not just national but also global politics. And we're living at times of seismic global transformations. What is your perspective on the evolution of the European Union nowadays? And I'm talking, my first question is independently of the situation of Armenia. There is talk of in Europe, of a revival. Some people argue, that now that the US seems to be turning away, Europe is finally coming into its own. It's developing its own defense capabilities, allegedly, for instance. And then there is those who say that the EU is on its way out, or that it's lost its way, that it still has no foreign policy or direction, and that what it's doing now is just papering over the cracks. Do you have an opinion in this discussion? We'll be talking about Armenia shortly, but this question is obviously relevant to the rest of the discussion.
The answer to your question has two parts. Because there's a part of your question that's only relevant after January 20th of this year. Let's deal with the issue prior to January 20th, when there was not the secondary issue that you brought up, which was the cutoff, the U.S. disengagement from Europe and other things. The European Union is in a profound political crisis, and driven by two issues. One of them being essentially immigration, or not legal immigration into Europe, and the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the demographic changes that causes, which is quite distressing for a lot of European societies, no matter how people put it. Secondly, it's the economic crisis within the EU. The EU is a low-performing economy when it comes to growth and other essentially in the new economy. I think in the last 40 years, Europe, there's not a single company, I think, worth, above a certain threat. There's none of the modern great companies, whether it's in AI, whether it's in IT, whether it's in social media, come out of Europe.
If you list all the IT giants in the world, there's almost none in Europe.
None in Europe. So you have a profound immigration crisis, which they have not been able to deal with, which is leading to a demographic change that many people don't like, and there's a reaction to it. Then you have this economic crisis in which you have this underperforming economy, in which you have these bureaucrats in Brussels that are more worried about how you package a cucumber rather than how you grow an economy. So until you deal with those two profound issues, and on one of those issues, on immigration, it's going to mean that you're going to have a European politics that's way to the right of what you have today. That's the reality. 20 years from now, Marine Le Pen will be a mainstream figure. This is the thing that people don't want to understand. AfD will be a mainstream party. European politics is going to move to the right. It's going to move dramatically to the right for the reasons that I explained, which is driven by these demographic changes and the response to it by the majority of the population. The second one is the post-January 20th Trump-created crisis, in which my phrase with this is on January 20th, or actually the day of the Zelensky-Vance-Trump meeting, Europeans found out that they're Armenians. That whatever presumptions they had about security guarantees and all these things don't exist. So, and what is that old parlance? We're all Armenians now. All Europeans are Armenians now.
Yes.
So that's what you had. And this is going to, let's just, on a just purely economic level, Europe has by far the capacity to defend itself. Russia first of all, this notion of Russian armies marching into Western Europe is ridiculous. I mean, it's just simply not going to happen. But Russia, as a threatening force to Europe, when confronted by the economic capacity of the European Union, is a joke. There's such a massive imbalance. What lacks in Europe is the political will and the political leadership. There's not a single European leader that would, and people will criticize me for this, but if you talk about a vision, it's really only Macron that has a part of it, that have a vision of, and mostly because he's French, of the political leadership that you need, because you need people that can galvanize and push this and just shove this down people's throats and make it happen. But when you have a European Union that gets led around the nose by some third-rate Viktor Orban, I mean, what would the De Gaulles or the Churchills of the world done with Orban? They would have crushed him in like 5 minutes. They would have said, "You want to do this? Fine. No money. You're out of the EU. Go F yourself." But that leadership doesn't exist. So Europe is quite capable of filling in the American vacuum. There's some technical things, intelligence and other things, but those are just matter of time and money. The issue is political will. And does the European population have the what it takes for that? How many Europeans are willing to join the army or go fight or do half a dozen different things? I remember one of the interactions I had during the war is with it was an Italian journalist in 2020, and the person essentially said, your young people are still willing to fight for the ashes of their fathers and the temples of their gods. Ours are not. So that needs to change. Does it change? I have no way of knowing that. But until these two crises are dealt with, plus with this Trump effect, which somewhat feeds into it, the European project is going to be at a standstill.
All right. Well, the answer, I think, is quite clear. Thank you very much. Let's move to more Armenian questions. The Armenian Parliament, rather, has just adopted this law saying that Armenia is now going to join, or is starting its process of joining the European Union. At the same time, I get the impression that the government is in no hurry to move fast. Can you help us understand the implications of this law, where we stand? Is all this just political noise? Has Armenia given an important signal? What does it mean?
This is very important and entirely unimportant. There's an aspect of it is the equivalent of me saying that I'm going to be the center forward for Arsenal. But what I want and what is likely to happen are not the same thing.
Hopefully Armenia's chances are better, though.
Hopefully. This is a nod. Where this is relevant, this is a public, acknowledged nod that that's the direction that Armenia wants to move in and towards. Okay? So it has symbolic relevance. Practically, it means absolutely nothing. Armenia, even if it had all the qualifiers to join the EU, I do not see EU expansion happening anywhere until the crises that I had discussed are dealt with. So directionally, it's important. It leads to better relationships with the EU. Third, it leads to reforms that we need to do anyway. The road to the EU, in many ways, is as important as joining the EU, because what the EU does is it's a civilizing force. It beats you into a certain kind of governance. So that the process is good. Is Armenia going to be a member of the European Union? One, until the inner European crisis is dealt with, which I do not see in the short run. No. So it's a good thing, but then, politics changes on a dime. We could be in a situation where 8 years from now, there's a change in dynamics, and there's a short window for 5 more countries to join the EU, and we could be on the list because we've done everything right.
Yes.
So on one level, it's very important. On just the reality of it is, Armenia joining the EU, highly unlikely at this point.
Great.
Not great, actually.
Great, because your answer is very clear as to, so Armenia needs to be ready for when the time comes,
Yes.
when political will is present, and we don't know when that will be. But so what you're saying is that all the other countries that are actually further in line towards accession won't join anytime soon
Of course
either.
not.
Montenegro, whatever, North Macedonia.
There's a reason. There's an underlying reason for this. The EU, I think this process needs to be reversed. Countries need to prove themselves. How are they valuable to the EU? Okay? And I can make the case that almost every country in front of our list is less valuable to the EU than we are because of the things that we can bring to the table.
Well, I was going to ask, what can Armenia bring to the table?
What Armenia can bring to the table is cultural. Armenia in the European Union is a country that will overperform because of cultural reasons. Armenians, there's 4 or 5 groups of people in the world that are the sort of the middlemen minorities that sort of have connections all over the world. It's the Jews, overseas Indians, overseas Chinese, and Armenians, to a less extent the Lebanese. Armenia would be the only country that would be on that list. Today, Armenia does more than close to $2.3 billion in IT exports. We have 2 or 3 unicorn companies in Armenia. The entrepreneurial culture on the IT side that's in Armenia today is actually lacking in Europe. The sort of this, I use an Armenian word, the charpik, connecting the world, where everybody can make something out of something, where it's there.
Even the can-do culture.
Yes, the
absolutely.
reach, the Armenian reach is very long. From, the hottest agent in Hollywood now is a woman named Alinke Shishian, to the Google headquarters where there's 300 Armenians. The Armenian reach is very long. That's exactly what Europe needs. You have, when they're insourcing, for example, chip design, it's actually companies here with examples here that are being copied in Europe, which is actually remarkable. Synopsys actually has a program with the Polytechnic that the EU wants to copy in Europe as far as teaching people how to do chip design. So the issue is, what do you bring to the table? And what we bring to the table is that can-do culture, especially in, that's the business connections and entrepreneurship, which frankly Europe lacks. This in the world, you have this, all the things that are problematic in Western Europe, this lack of certainty, pension, this uncertainty of the modern economy, that's Armenian bread and butter because it's all uncertainty and always has been. So it's a question of how you fit, it's like there's a phrase in Armenian called kaptsanel, it's like this kaptsanel culture, but now the entire world has become about kaptsanel, about connecting things that aren't there and making a living. People doing piecework here, piecework there. In many ways, instead of us becoming like the rest of the world is becoming like us.
And geopolitically, I mean, isn't Armenia's geopolitical situation, is it a handicap? Is it an asset for Europe?
Neither. Because people, frankly, geopolitics is relevant, but on some levels, on when it comes to economics, it isn't.
Right.
Israel is one of the strongest economies in the world. It has almost no trade with any of our neighbors. Because today, the world is your market, not your neighbor that could be relevant, irrelevant. What is Israel going to do with Syria, even if Syria was a normal country? What are you going to trade with them? So geopolitics is relevant. It's this, it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, but it does not really hamper. It is not determinative when it comes to economic performance. Armenia is a perfect example of that. Post First War, Armenia has averaged somewhere in the 5 or 6% growth range, if you average it out consistently. When we have no resources, we have all the disadvantages. And today, Armenia per capita income is the richest country in the Caucasus.
Yes, certainly higher than Azerbaijan.
By far, not even close.
Which surprises everybody. Yes.
Yeah. Which shouldn't surprise anyone. Resource-based economies always underperform with things like that. So it's just people really don't know what they're talking about. So that's what the relevance of Armenia is, and that's what you can market yourself as. And not even on, you don't have to make up anything. It's the reality of what's out there. And I hate to say it, Armenia has more political freedoms now than most countries in the EU. No one's going to chase you down the street and arrest you for what you're wearing or what you're saying. We have freedom of speech in this country.
In a way that no longer exists in Europe?
It doesn't. I mean, let's be honest. No one's going to come home and arrest you for your Facebook posts. Everybody will tell you whatever ideas they have, however ignorant or stupid, and no one's going to come after you.
Yes.
And quite a lot of it is ignorant and stupid, but people have a right to do that.
Yes, I'm not sure Armenia is unique in that sense.
Ignorance, no. Look who the president of the United States is.
Yes. Let's not get into that. Let's come back to the relationship with the European Union, or rather, you were saying Armenia is a cultural economic asset, so to speak. There is a.
You can make a compelling case.
Yeah. Is that something that, to your knowledge, factors into the perspective in the EU? Is
Absolutely
that something
not.
they're aware of? No.
Absolutely not.
But should be.
Yeah, because they don't. The European Union, I've said this in a forum a couple of months ago, is the greatest. It's the greatest political problem. It's the greatest political project, literally in the history of the world. Outside of the Chinese Communist Party and what they've done to alleviate poverty, the European Union has actually changed the lives of more people than any other political institution that we know, for the better.
Yes.
Except when it comes to storytelling, that story and that narrative is told by some of the most boring, unimaginative people on the planet, who will not even understand the points that I made because it's beyond their comprehension, frankly, because it's beyond their political imagination.
Yes, I think you put your finger on it. One of the activities at the center of the relationship between Armenia and the EU is support for reforms. And I think you could describe the quid pro quo, if we want to get a little bit into the substance of this, is that the EU provides access to a vast market, a continent-sized market, providing Armenia reforms its institution, its legislation, so that, for instance, food products conform to health regulations, or that European companies that are doing businesses here have access to a reliable judicial system, that sort of thing. How do you rate the effectiveness of this cooperation to reform legislation and government in Armenia? In other words, what I've described is theory, but what about the practice?
It's hit and miss in certain areas. But frankly, I'm not going to put the responsibility. Listen, to create a normal country in Armenia is not the responsibility of the European Union. It's the responsibility of Armenians. So we will have an independent judiciary when Armenians want an independent judiciary. We will have honest elections like we've had over the last few years because Armenians wanted honest elections, not because the European Union or anybody else forced them to. So yes, European Union is a good source in pushing these reforms, but it's not the responsibility of the European Union to make a normal country. It is our responsibility. So we're either failing or we're not failing. And for the most part, if you look at structural reforms, when it comes to building things, this government has failed. Not entirely. There's fits and starts. But for the most part, if you look at the independent judiciary and other things, they have failed in creating it because the level of competence really isn't there. So the European Union can play a role, but I in no way put that responsibility on them. It's not that, this is sort of the Georgian view, come make us Sweden. It doesn't work like that.
Yes, I'm sorry if the question seemed to imply that. I wasn't implying this was the EU's responsibility.
Yeah.
But I've been hearing about the EU reforming Armenia for something like 20
The
years.
EU can't even
It's
reform
been going
itself.
on for more. Of this partnership of Armenia reforming with the EU assistance, and I'm wondering whether it can be used as a make believe.
Absolutely. No. It's useful. I mean, whatever the EU does on that front here is quite useful, and they need to get credit for it. But it's not going to lead to where it needs to unless there's a political leadership and the will to make it happen on this side. And which sometimes the will exists, the competence doesn't exist. Sometimes the will doesn't exist. Like judicial reform, if you are a political operative and you control the judiciary, I don't care who you are. You could be Stalin or you could be Nelson Mandela. It's a temptation not to give it up. There's a reason judicially isn't being reformed in Armenia. Because it's a political tool.
Yes.
And it's a valuable political tool.
So the government of Armenia has been courting the EU. I recall, for instance, that in the European Parliament a couple of years ago, Pashinyan gave a 40-minute speech, which is, even in the European Parliament, quite exceptional.
That's a short speech for him.
It's a long speech in the European Parliament. Members of Parliament get a minute or two.
Yeah.
There is clearly a general pro-EU momentum in Armenia. Public opinions say that support for EU accession is at 78%, or at least one poll says this. And at the same time, the government is in no hurry. They say they want to move forward one step at a time. And that sounds a lot like the pre-2018 governments who were balancing between great powers but didn't actually have a plan. What is your analysis of the position of the government of Armenia?
That's not fair.
No?
Because if your membership is nowhere near realistic and the EU is nowhere near starting that process, to be aggressively for that, for example, because what's the big issue is you have to get out of this Eurasian Union, which is this it's the European Union for idiots, So, but that has its political risks. So, if you do not know that there's an actual payoff on the one side, the state is actually being quite logical in not burning unnecessary bridges until the time comes. So there's no reluctance. It's just a function. It's just why do you want to upset the bear when the prospect is not there? I don't see any most optimistic scenario in the next 10 years anyone joining the EU. So of course they're going to be slow. But it's not the same thing as what was pre-2018. There was no option. The EU was not on the table, because the Russians would veto it, and they had a veto on everything in this country that no longer exists.
Yes, the risk I was alluding to is actually losing momentum. If you go too slowly, you might end up stopping
losing
altogether.
Momentum if you are continuing with your internal reforms. Okay, 10 years from now, in Armenia that has a per capita income that is 16,000, which is on Eastern European level, is a much better candidate.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, in fact, it'll be way ahead of all the other peer competitors that are trying to get into EU. Armenia is if you look at the countries ahead of Armenia has a per capita income higher than most of them, is democratic than almost all of them. So it's not hard to put the package together.
But it's also very small. Apart from Montenegro, Armenia is one of the smallest, right?
And we're always one of the smallest. Yes. So what? I mean, so it's just a question of it's not the size of the dog. It's the bite in the dog.
Right. I'm aware of the emphasis you place on Armenia building up its capabilities in the field of security, defending against the obvious threats. It's difficult to take issue with that. You believe that Armenia must prioritize its capabilities in the military field and form alliances with anyone willing to help. France and India have become key partners for Armenia, for instance. Do you see the EU coming to play a significant role in the Armenian security system?
Yeah.
Can the EU become an ally of sorts?
Listen, yes. The EU, even though it's not a military force, as one of the primary political forces in the world, carries security weight because they can sanction you, they can do a lot of different things. So a strong relationship with the EU on that front is relevant. It's not the same
Yes.
thing as having a relationship with the United States, which is almost always security and nothing else. So yes, it has a relevant source, and there's actually even EU. We're part of the defense disbursements that that they give for your capacity to defend yourself. So that's already there. And the third,
Are you saying that Armenia is part of the defense disbursements?
yeah, it's like we got $10 million last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
The peace facility.
Yeah,
Yes.
peaceful. So we're part of that. But the third most important one is actually to be able to buy weapons from EU countries, and we actually can do that now.
Right.
Actually, almost the entirety of the Western world is open for us for weapons purchases outside of the United States, and that's more procedural. So those are the ways. The EU is a secondary security instrument. That's not their mandate, but it has a role, and frankly, it has an expanding role as NATO essentially becomes disemboweled by the Trump administration.
Yes.
There's going to be, as much as people laugh about it, there's going to be some sort of an EU-European army, because NATO, as a functioning body, is not likely, especially if another Trump-type person gets elected, is not likely to survive politically. I mean, it'll always be there because political setups never die. But NATO only matters because it's the U.S. guarantee. It doesn't matter in any other context. Without the U.S. guarantee, NATO is nothing.
Right.
So now that that's gone, you have no choice but to create some form of a European army.
Which
Not necessarily it's sort of like the way NATO is, where everyone has their own army, but they're part of a collective.
Yes.
Not that there's going to be some magical EU army. That's not what I'm talking about.
But you said one of the elements of European power is its just sheer mass, economic mass.
It's the largest market.
Human mass.
Largest,
yes.
It's the largest, richest market in the world.
So are there non-military ways it can contribute to Armenia's security?
Of course. The EU, within 5 minutes, can end all of Armenia's security issues if the combined EU countries said that any aggression against Armenia will lead to sanctions against SOCAR. Finished. Every security issue that we have is gone.
So what lessons can we draw from the fact that has not happened yet? We've had ethnic cleansing, we've had war, we've had, political prisoners.
It is all about relevance. We are not relevant enough for them to make that sacrifice, There's a gradation among human beings with white Europeans on top, Israelis, then you come down with, unfortunately Africans in the bottom, Balkan Muslims, we're somewhere slightly below Balkan Muslims. So until you make your country more valuable, then you will move up the food chain of humanity.
So you're saying it has to do with skin color?
Partly.
Okay.
And then realistically, when you look at it, we're, as Armenians, we're too dark for the right and too white for the left.
Right.
So we're stuck in this no man's land.
Okay. We didn't talk. You didn't mention the European monitoring facility. We have monitored. Then I'm asking about it now. You have the what is it called? The Armenian monitoring mission. Here on the border, we have a few hundred observers who are there as witnesses in case something happens. How would you rate the contribution of that facility?
We'll take it as the work that they do is vitally important, because that's essentially what it is. It's a trigger. It's like a political trigger, that if there's aggression, you're going to shoot through them, you're going to shoot on top of them, you're going to shoot and kill EU monitors. That triggers it needs to trigger a response from the European Union. And this is the reason why the other guy wants them gone. So they're actually a relevant force. And they're actually doing good. There are many things in them that I would change. Like they tell the other side where they're going to be. They shouldn't do that. But those are marginal things. For the most part, they are quite valuable. And they make the cost of aggression for the other side higher.
Yes.
So I would say within the 90th percentile, it's a very, very good thing.
Yes. So, I mean, we have to note that in the last 2 years, since that mission arrived, the number of incidents of the border has dropped. Hasn't there been no attack, right?
Less, but that's not necessarily because of them. Last year we had none of these made-up shooting incidents because there was COP29 and there were other things.
Mm-hmm.
So, partly, not entirely.
Right. Do you think, apart that mission, that the EU is embracing the security challenges in the Caucasus in its diplomacy? I mean, are they bringing these things up with the Azerbaijani leadership?
I'm sure they're bringing it up, but the Israeli leadership doesn't respect the EU.
Right.
They see them as just a bunch of nuns.
Yes.
They're afraid of Trump. They're not afraid of the EU, trust me.
And as long as we don't interrupt the imports of gas,
which
nothing
is
will change.
1 or 2% of European gas, which they somehow think is quite important.
Yes, and 65% of Azerbaijani gas exports. Yes. Let's talk about the diaspora for a minute.
Okay.
So, in the context of the EU-Armenian relationship, does the diaspora have a role to play, one way or the other? And how do you assess the role that it's been playing in the past, to the extent that?
Well, I mean, I'm sure you're discussing the European diaspora.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, the European diaspora, in many ways, it's France and all the others in real terms, because France is really the only country where the Armenian diaspora has a role, because it's old, it's established, and it's quite affluent and wealthy. Where the Armenian diaspora has a role, obviously, is...
Belgaha is a Belgian radio station. We'd like to claim that we're very important.
You're very rich.
Sorry,
you're
for
important in that
yes.
way. No, there's it's to essentially push the relevance, the importance of EU involvement in Armenia, support for Armenia, and a clear understanding of the security situation and who our neighbors are. There is this very typical European liberal opinion, which they imagine like there's no difference between having Austria as your neighbor or Azerbaijan. They don't want to comprehend that you're dealing with a completely different animal here. Because they have these universalist views which fall apart when it matches reality. There's not a single... if any other European leader, and if we want to call him a European leader, would have said the things that if the president of Serbia had said any of the things that Aliyev has said about Armenians, he'd be on an EU sanctions list. Done.
Yes.
It's not even close. I mean, that the level of... this is a guy who committed, a year and a half ago, the highest crime under international law, which is genocide. Ethnic cleansing is genocide. And he gets invited here or there as a normal person.
And the EU Commissioner for Energy has
I know, he's there kissing his ass. So the issue is to change that narrative and to just bash them with it. That with the contradictions of the reality of what they're saying and what they're doing. So it's constant activity and being in people's face when it comes to setting the agenda and differentiating between the two countries. Yes.
So it's the role is advocacy, really, is public advocacy. But at the same time, it's not like nobody's been saying this over the last 20 years.
They have.
So how come they haven't been heard, or have they not been going about it the right way?
I have no idea. I don't want to judge other people's work. Listen, part of it was up until, first of all, the Soviet Union in Armenia ended with the German invasions in 1922. So the European Union always saw Armenia as a Russian project, okay, or a Russia-connected country. So there's no appetite for that. The enemy had worked the EU, and one of the issues actually is to unravel the Azeri narrative about their relevance. Because if you ask the average EU bureaucrat, they think Azerbaijan provides 20% of their energy needs, or like half a dozen different things. Or that Armenia was the occupying power, or how they're the victims. So, but that narrative has started to change dramatically. If you actually engage with EU officials, the attitudes towards Armenia are entirely different, and even the outside of the ones that are bought and paid for, even they've understood who the problem is here. It's not us, it's them.
Right.
So this narrative is changing. Part of advocacy is actually to take this momentum and just push it further.
Yes, but what changed over the last 2 years? Two things changed roughly 2 or 3 years ago, since that change occurred. There was the war in Ukraine, and then there was the ethnic cleansing in Karabakh. Which one of these two events made the European Union see the light?
No, I think what made them see the light is the open hostility of the Aliyev regime versus the EU.
Right.
I mean, he speaks about the EU in terms of an enemy. So it has nothing to do with us. It's the fact that that other guy is essentially made a strategic mistake by picking fights with people he shouldn't be picking fights with. I mean, what are you doing in New Caledonia? I mean, it's not our work. It's the enemy who did our work in this case. Let's just be one thing. Let's go back on the EU. Let's understand one thing about the ethnic cleansing in the EU. The EU supported the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. No matter what they tell you, they saw as that is the price you need to pay to have a normal Armenia and to settle this issue. They had no problems with the ethnic cleansing. What they wanted was an organized ethnic cleansing in which some fig leaf signatures signed. There's 500 Armenians left, that you can be the model minority there. They were supportive of the ethnic cleansing. The United States supported the ethnic cleansing, the European Union supported the ethnic cleansing, and the Russians allowed it, and we couldn't do anything about it because we weren't strong enough. So anybody who says otherwise is not telling the truth. They were not shocked by it. They were shocked by the savagery of it, which embarrassed them. That's what concerned them, was the fact that this noble savage that they've adopted in Baku didn't act like the noble, he just acted like the savage. And that embarrassed them. These images, children with their head cut off, soldiers killed, women, that embarrassed them. And 100,000 people on the move embarrassed them. That's what they're upset about, is the fact that this was not an organized ethnic cleansing, that it blew their cover of what they actually wanted to do.
But what does that say about the EU as a peace project if they're okay with ethnic cleansing?
Because we're the children of a lesser God at this point. That's what it means, because this would not have been allowed in Kosovo, and it wasn't allowed in Kosovo.
Absolutely.
And it was a different time, but still, the standards are different. But sovereign state issue in Artsakh, there's there's a legalistic aspect to it that's different. So attacking a sovereign Armenian state is a much bigger problem than ethnically cleansing Armenians out of Artsakh. In the view of your normal average European political or bureaucrat.
Yes. If I may add a personal comment, I think dissociating these two legal principles, I mean, the sovereignty of recognized states on the one hand and respect for populations, for minority populations, placing one above the other or dissociating the two, not realizing they're part of the same problem, is one of Europe's is a danger for Europe in the future, because you have minority problems everywhere. And in Ukraine, the problem in Ukraine is very much a minority problem. Russia is fighting on behalf of Russians in Donbass.
In some ways, yes.
Yeah, in the Donbass. At least that's one of the aspects of this war. And not being able to embrace both facets of the problem is, I think, something that hopefully the EU will work on in the future. Eric, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today. It was a fascinating conversation. For those who don't already follow the program, I encourage you to go and find Eric every week on CivilNet. It's Thursday, isn't it? It comes out. It's a great way to understand more about Armenian politics with a global perspective, as I think has become evident today. In the meantime, I look forward to seeing you back here at Crossroads on Belgahai to continue our exploration about Armenia and the European Union. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.